It's red, which means it's recording. However, I'm not moving on the screen at all, so I don't know what's happening.
Let me check my phone.
Why don't you check it? This is my phone. I'll leave it here, so I'll turn it off when I'm done. If you check your phone. Luigi is live, but is he moving on the screen, or is it just that face of terror? Oh, there is. That's fantastic. Okay. The opposite of terror. Today, we're talking about Jehovah Shalom, which means the Lord is peace. That's okay. I'm just going to ignore my phone. It means the Lord is peace, and that's what I'm covering today. And when, I don't know, I guess I'm human, so when I automatically think of, like, what is peace, I think we assume it's just the absence of conflict, right? We think, well, the opposite of peace is war, right? And so when war ceases, that is peace. But when I take a look at what the word means, and I go a little bit deeper, and then I also consider it quite interesting that the Jewish community, when they meet with each other, they say shalom. It means peace, like peace be with you, right? And so when I begin to study deeper into what that word means, and the whole aspect of that peace, really opens up my mind to a whole bunch more. We'll get into that, okay? The reason why it's not just the absence of conflict is because when God created the world, He didn't create it with conflict in mind. It's not like He was like, so when you think of like the foundations, we see, because we've seen war so much and conflict so much, that we're like, peace must be the absence of. But when God created, He didn't create with the idea that there would be all kinds of conflict. Now sin has entered the world, and there is, but it was with a different outlook. And so I'm quoting from John chapter 10, verse 10. For those of you in your cars, if you want to get Judges chapter 6 ready, you guys here will have the screen, so, but, excuse me, John 10:10. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. Other translation is to give them life and give it in the full, a fullness of life. So when I think of like the opposite, the thief, which would be Satan, whose purpose is conflict, whose purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy, and then I'm like, but God doesn't respond and say, I am peace. He instead talks about a richness of life, a full life. Should turn it on. There we go. So it means a sound mind, a sound heart. It talks about not just a tranquility, but like a fullness of being inside and outside and around you. The Hebrew word is shalom, and it talks about well-being and a satisfaction of life. And then I flat out took my Strong's dictionary, which does my Greek to Hebrew to English for me. And so it's number 07965. Not that any of you are going to write that down. Maybe Janice. Okay? It's from the base word salam, shalom. And it means to be safe, sound, healthy, perfect, complete. It signifies a sense of well-being and harmony, both within and outside of you. Completeness, wholeness. And then I love how it begins to cover all of this stuff. With your health, with your welfare, when you think about your safety and security, prosperity, it even talks about rest, being full of rest, harmony, and then of course at the end it says, and the absence of agitation or discord, a state of calm without anxiety or stress. So now I'm just like, oh my goodness, peace is so much more. It's not just, absence of conflict, but it is like a state of being, something that is inside of you that is completely at peace with everything that is going on in your life. Like, you have a harmony, not only inside, but everything around you. And peace, at least that definition of peace, you're only ever going to find in God. Okay? You're not going to find it in any other way. I love that. Like Jesus responds and talks about like satisfaction and full satisfaction, life, full life, well-being, health, security, safety, all of that is in there. It means everything has been taken care of. That is where that source of peace comes from. No anxiety, not having to worry about anything, knowing that God's got absolutely everything. And then at the end of the definition when I was reading it, it talked about vigor or vitality. So it's not just a peace that is, because it does talk about calm and tranquil, but it's also talking about living life to the full, but with like passion, right? Just because there's passion doesn't mean it isn't like peaceful. They go hand in hand. So not only are you living a beautiful life, tranquil, peaceful, everything is taken care of, but you're doing it full of life, full of passion, full of vitality, and that is the way God designed for us to live life. And that is the peace that is being talked about. A sound mind, a sound heart. The first time it pops up is in Judges chapter 6, and so we're going to go right into that. So if you want to pull out your Bibles, we're going to be reading a big chunk of this. Okay? I put it there, so it's verse 23, the first time it pops up, but we're going to get into all of chapter 6. Verse 23 says, "It is all right," the Lord replied. "Do not be afraid. You will not die." And Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and named it Jehovah Shalom, which means the Lord is peace. Now, of course, we kind of have to get into a little bit of background here, because it's absolutely amazing to me that Gideon creates this and says Jehovah Shalom, the Lord is peace, when you look at the background of where he's coming from and what is happening there. Now, it's been 200 years from the first time that Jehovah Mekadesh, which we talked about 2 weeks ago, the Lord sanctifies and makes holy, has come about. So 200 years have passed, and now it's like God is revealing himself in a new way, but in the most troublesome of time. All very interesting. So they have made it to the promised land. They made it to the place that God is like, this is where you guys are supposed to be. And when they got there, it was great, this is mine, but why does everyone else around me have greener grass? That's what they did. They looked at all the cultures around them and been like, okay, so it's great. God brought us here, he gave us this land, we have this, and this, and it's awesome. But look at what they're doing over there. Is there any way that maybe we can like maintain what we have with our God, but also possibly include some of what the other gods are doing, just so that we get the benefits of both, right? And so they began to incorporate and to dabble in the cultures that were around them. They looked at them and said, the grass is greener over there. I want some of that. And then what happens? And then God says, oh, well, like you guys are turning your back on me. You shall have no other God but. Right? And that's not what you guys are doing. You guys are doing whatever they want you to do. And so he gives them over to their pleasure, to what they wanted. He says, this is what you want, this is fine. Then I'm stepping back. Okay? So like Israel turned their backs on God, and then God's like, fine, you can go ahead, go in that direction. And then the very countries, the very people around them that they were looking at, like, wow, your grass is so much greener, ended up completely over them. And so Israel would grow, make beautiful and wonderful crops, and then they would come in, the other nations would come in, take everything, like locusts, devour everything, leave everything barren, and then leave. It's great. These are the people that they looked up to. And God's like, okay, well, I leave you to it. That's what you wanted, right? See, they began to go from what was black and what was white and slowly muddled it to this kind of gray color. They decided, well, what if what's right we can vote upon? We talked about that a couple weeks too, right? Instead of being an absolute truth and following what God has said, you need to be following. They said, well, can't we kind of decide, like, we want to be mostly good, right? So can't we decide on what that good is, and instead of relying on God, decided to define it for themselves, okay? And of course, things got muddled when we do that. It's also the time where, well, they stopped listening to prophets, so God kind of stopped sending them, and he gave them judges instead. So that really, it's not the first time in the Bible where we see stuff like this, because they had, what they were struggling with inside is the two masters idea, right? They wanted to be like, this is our God, this is what he's given us, but they also wanted everything else. Hey guys, come on in. I don't bite. We have some visitors, it's awesome. I know, and I'm like embarrassing them. Welcome. Sit wherever you guys like. Awesome. Okay, so it's the idea of the serving two masters, right? They were like, well, this is what all the benefits that our God is giving us, but look at all the stuff that the other people have. And so inside of their hearts, they began to struggle. And the thing is, we kind of do the same thing. We have, I'm going to move the podium back to the middle. Ooh, maybe not so sweet. My ADD, my wife's coming with me. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, where was that? We do the same thing. We get stuck with this idea of, yeah, God is awesome, and I want what He has for me, but at the same time, wouldn't it be nice to also have this? Wouldn't it be nice to also have that? And we get stuck into this like materialism thing that, oh, it'd be really nice to own this, to have this. And your mind frame begins to change, right? And we talked about this before as well, where it's like, instead of the idea that God owns everything, and we're just responsible for what He's given us, you get the idea that, wait, this is mine. And that's exactly what like the spirit of Mammon is. It's the spirit of greed, the spirit of this belongs to me. And so their perspective began to change from, right, this is like God's, this is what God has given us, to we want a little bit more. I want a little bit more. I want to have. Look at the nations around me, and they seem to have. So why don't I start doing what they're doing? It's very interesting. When I was living in Echo Bay, status symbol there is different than down south. So I came from down south, right? And I think there more is like houses is kind of your status symbol. I remember times when my mom would drive around, and there were certain places that we would drive to and just be like, wow, castles do exist. This thing has spires. Like, it's pretty crazy. They have some pretty interesting houses. But living in Echo Bay, I looked at, a lot of people had these trucks. Really, really nice trucks. And I'm just like, wait. You're telling me that you spent more on your truck than you did for your house? And it's like, yeah, but I also have like, an ATV and snowmobile, but my truck is my baby. And I was just like, I'm just so confused. If I ever was going to spend like that amount of money on a truck, I'd want to put a snowplow on it. I need to put it to work. I need it to pay for itself. And so I just was confused and finally asked the question. I'm like, well, why? I don't understand. If it's not making you any money, if it's not doing anything for you, why would you get such a gas guzzler to be driving around? And they looked at me and they said, well, in all honesty, around here, having the nice truck is your status symbol. It's how everyone knows that you've made it in life. When you're driving down in your truck, it makes that nice rumbling sound. Even if you don't use it for anything, it's like, look what I've been like able to accomplish. Even though the lease is like destroying me and my income every month, it was their status symbol. It's what made them who they were. And so Israel was doing exactly the same thing. They were given the promised land, and then they were looking at all the nations around them, and they're like, well, the grass is greener on the other side. I want some of that. So we know Israel, and they fall into this pattern, okay, where they get into sin, and then in response to sin, they're punished. And it's very interesting. God doesn't always need to punish by like causing some catastrophe. Sometimes He can just pull away and just be like, let you guys like reap the rewards for what you're doing. He can even pull away, but one way or another, punishment comes. And so when you look at what was going on in Israel in the time of Gideon, for the record, if you guys have your Bibles, I'm in Judges chapter 6. And so God kind of pulls away. It's like, this is what you wanted, and this is what you'll have. And then all those countries just come in, and it talks about how they like lived in holes in the ground. They lived in caves. They lived, like they were so terrorized by the countries around them that they looked up to, that they had 7 years of just, it was bad. It was really bad. And again, I wonder sometimes, we don't do the same thing. So they do they sin. There's punishment for that sin. And then they realize, oh man, we screwed up. Maybe we need to turn back to God. And they repent and they turn back to God. Then there's this period of spiritual renewal where they're like, God is good. This is where we should have been. This is where we need to be. And then God provides blessings and provision for them, and everything is good. But then slowly they start doing it all over again. And they start looking around and being like, oh, but I want, and they go right back into sin, right? And sometimes I think we go through the exact same thing, that there are periods in our life where things are good. right? And maybe we stop appreciating God and what He has done. Maybe we stop looking to Him, and we begin to be like, well, I can do this for myself. Maybe if I make a little bit more money at work, it'll give me more security at home, right? I can pay off my mortgage a little bit faster. That way I can own my home a little bit quicker, and then I can have that peace of mind. I can have that, right? And we begin to think that we can provide for ourselves all the things that ultimately God is the one who gives us. The God of peace, who gives us satisfaction and fullness of life, who gives us all of those things. And so, I just remember in my notes I just wrote down the idea that there's this gentleman who could have gotten an incredible promotion, right? And promotions are bad, that's not what I'm saying. It's just in sacrifice to his promotion, he had to give up his Sundays. And it was just like, well, I can do this, and then I'll be able to do this, and this, and this, and this. Promotion sounds great. Went for promotion, but could no longer go to church on Sundays. And missed out, but that was just the beginning, because work began to consume more and more of his time and his energy, and he lost his focus and his time with God. It's not just the fact that it was Sunday, but it was what it was doing to him. And then sure enough, he's like, well, but I got this promotion, I'm able to do this, this, and this, and then the company got into a little bit of trouble, and then the first person they needed to get rid of were the people they paid the most. So he ended up losing his job. One of the first people, and then he stops and is like, I should have relied on God, right? So there's an example of things that can happen in our lives where we lose focus of God. We take what is black, what is white, and it gets muddled into this gray color, and then we start serving ourselves rather than God. And then God's like, you turned your back on me. I'm not turning my back on you. But it's amazing how quickly we look back and then we blame God. It's amazing to me how we can cut God out of all kinds of different things in our lives and be like, I don't need God here. Or, and I think big things, whether it's government, politics, or schools, or big things, we turn our backs on God, we cut Him out of things, and then when things happen in the world, it's like, where is God? Where's He been? Right? And this is kind of exactly what happens to Gideon. So let's read. This is Judges chapter 6. And so let's read. And right off it starts with that cycle I was talking about. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains and caves and strongholds. Wherever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders from the Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east would attack Israel. Camping in the land and destroying crops as far away as Gaza, they left the Israelites with nothing to eat, taking all the sheep, goats, cattle, donkeys. These enemy hordes, coming with their livestock and tents, were as thick as locusts. They arrived in droves of camels, too numerous to count, and they stayed until the land was stripped bare. So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord's help. You see that cycle going on? they look at all the countries around and be like, I want to be more like them. I want to have what they have. The grass is greener over there. And God's like, that's who you want to look up to instead of me? All right, that's fine. Go ahead. Go hang out with them. And then see what they do to you. And then we see what they do. And then they realize, oh, we messed up. And they cried out to the Lord. And of course, God answers. Which is amazing. Because no matter how many times we turn our back on God, God is still patiently waiting for you to turn back. I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still your dad, and I still love you to pieces. Will you turn back and look at me? Can we have a conversation? When they cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites, which is awesome because it's like the time of Judges, but He sent someone to talk to them. He said, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you out of slavery in Egypt. I rescued you from the Egyptians and from all who oppressed you. I drove out your enemies and gave you their land. I told you, I am the Lord your God. You must not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live, but you have not listened to me. And so there's that idea again. God finally approaches Gideon, and it's lovely because Gideon is hiding in a threshing. I always thought it was like a vat, but it was more like this big hole in the ground that you would crush grapes at the top, and as it would run down, it would sit in this pool where it would ferment over time and stuff. That's how they made wine. It was very interesting when I learned all about that. But he's ultimately hiding in a hole in the ground, trying to get a little bit of wheat to save up some kind of food for himself, right? And they cried out, and God comes and he responds. And the first two questions that Gideon asks is, if God is with us, then why is all this happening? Why is there all this suffering? Where are all the miracles of God? Right? And again, we do the same thing. We cut God out of our lives. We cut God out of different things in our lives. And then things go horribly wrong. And then we ask the question, God, where have you been? What the heck? How can this happen? Why is this happening to us? Verse 11. And the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of the winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, Mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Sir, Gideon replied, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all the miracles that our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? And again, we do the same thing. We try to do things in our own power and in our own strength. Right? We cut God out. It's like, I can provide security. I can provide God peace. I can, if I did this and this would be better. And instead, like I said, if you remember the definition of God is peace. Right? Jehovah Shalom. God is peace. And you look at the definition, the very things that Israel was chasing after is the thing that God was trying to provide. Right? A sense of well-being, harmony, both within, without. Completeness, wholeness, health, welfare, safety, tranquility, prosperity, harmony, rest. So it's amazing that, this is the background of where this verse, where the first time you see the word Jehovah Shalom comes from. And the definition of what peace is. Because I'm just hold on a second. When you look at where the state of Israel was and what they were doing and what was happening to them, it is like the complete opposite of this. And remember John 10:10 as we started this morning. The thief comes to rob, kill, and destroy. And I'm just that's Satan at work right there. That's who the thief is. Right? So Satan's there to come to rob, destroy, and kill. To take everything from you. And Jesus says, and I have come that you might have life and have it to the full. So in this moment, I'm just looking at all of Israel, and they were trying to receive satisfaction from life, to find the satisfaction. And they thought to themselves, well, if we had more, if we could do this, if we could do that, then we would achieve this. And we would get those wonderful feelings of satisfaction, like I've accomplished what I've accomplished in life. And they were getting it so wrong. Even Gideon was like, where are you in all of this, God? So we turn our backs on God after chasing something else. And then we cut him out. So I mentioned all this. And then when things turn sour, we turn back and it's like, God, where have you been? So verse 17, Gideon replied, if you are truly going to help me, will you show me a sign to prove that it is really the Lord speaking to me? It's amazing that they've been so cut off. They turned their back so much from God that even when God shows up, he doesn't recognize him. He doesn't even believe it's him. It's like, no, you're going to have to prove to me that what you say is going to happen, right? Because he's been so apart from God for so long. Don't go away until I come back and bring my offering to you. And he answered, I will stay here until you return. Gideon hurried home. He cooked a young goat, and with a basket of flour, he baked some bread without yeast. Then, carrying the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, he brought them out and presented them to the angel who was under the great tree. The angel of the Lord said to him, place the meat and the unleavened bread on this rock, and pour the broth over it. And Gideon did as he was told. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and bread with the tip of his staff in his hand, and fire flamed up from the rock and consumed all that he had brought. And the angel of the Lord disappeared. When Gideon realized that it was an angel of the Lord, he cried out, O sovereign God, I am doomed. I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. He knows. It's like when you stand next to something, it's turning on a light in a room. Darkness can't abide. When you turn on the light, darkness disappears. There is no flashlight that you can turn on that is a flash dark. That you can overpower the light with darkness. Right? He realized the darkness in himself and is like, standing next to God. I'm doomed. I'm dead. Like, I'm going to die. It is all right, the Lord replied. Don't be afraid. You will not die. Gideon built an altar to the Lord there, and he named it Yahweh Shalom, which means the Lord is peace. It's very interesting because Israel missed the mark. They completely missed what God was trying to do. They were so focused on the place that God was bringing them to that they forgot the idea that God was bringing them to himself. You got that? If you're going to write any notes at all this morning, right, just understand that they were focused on the place. They were like, God is bringing me here. This is what we've been looking forward to for years and years and years, to be finally given this land, this place. But what God was trying to do was bring them back to himself. The peace, the satisfaction in life that they were looking for was never going to be found in the land. It could only be found in God himself. They missed it. And it took a little bit of time, it took a little bit of suffering before God finally got their attention, and they were like, God, we need you back. And they cried out, and God sent Gideon, right? So it wasn't about the place. And that's the thing. We get focused on a place, a thing, and we think this is what's going to bring me joy. This is what's going to bring me happiness. This is what's going to provide security for me, for my family. This is like, if only I could accomplish this, and this, then everything in my life would be okay. We set, because we look at the world around us and we set our own goals, right? We look and say, hey, if I went to school for this, and then I could make this kind of income, I can live in this kind of a home, I can have this kind of car or truck or whatever it is that you like. And we think if I could accomplish these things, then I would have made it in life. I can look back and I can be like, I'm happy because I've accomplished and achieved this, and this. Except that every single time that you reach a plateau of your achievement, you look back and be like, this isn't enough. I could do more. I could have more. I can get more. I can, and so you make yourself a new goal. And it's like, awesome. And we were meant to actually strive for things in our lives, to grow and to learn. That's the way God designed us, right? But not for self-pleasing. It's for God. And it's amazing that people can search all their lives for this satisfaction, this fullness of life, this accomplishment. And God's like, you guys are missing it. You don't need any of that. All you need is me. That thief comes to rob, kill, and destroy. I have come that you may have life, what life is, the meaning of life, and have it to the full. Only God knows the purposes for which you've been built. Only God's got your blueprints, okay? Like he knit you together in your mother's womb well before you were born, and he had good things planned out for you, and he's got the blueprints, and it's like, I made this person. And this is what they were created for. And this is truly where they're going to have enjoyment and like do incredible things. All they have to do is listen to me, and I will guide them through that. And it's amazing how when we trust God and we lay ourselves at God, to God, that he brings us way beyond our wildest dreams. That we can think and just be like, oh, wouldn't it be great to accomplish this? But you know what? I would rather accomplish what God needs me to accomplish. And then he takes that little dream we had and is like, oh, that's small. That is nothing. I need you to be in charge of this. If you're willing to listen to me and let me guide you, you're going to be like, and he multiplies your dreams beyond your wildest imagination. And he brings you to a place where you can look back and be like, wow, I did what God asked, not what I wanted. And now I truly have this joy, this peace of God. Peace isn't found in a place, or possession, or owning, or having, or accomplishing. It is simply found in God, in knowing who he is, in chasing after him, and in serving God, in letting him take you where you need to go. Guys, I never thought I'd be a lead pastor. When I went to Bible college, I went for a youth group. That's where my heart is, I'm ADD, I'm all over the place, I'm very excitable, it's just part of who I am, and I'll never forget even when, after graduating, they had everyone, we were kind of in this like horseshoe shape, and they started asking everyone, what are you called to, what ministry, are you willing to move districts, as far as like Ontario is concerned, is like west of Yonge and east of Yonge. They split it. There's just too many churches to be all under one umbrella, so they split. So they're like, are you willing to travel to like another place to be a pastor? Right? And so slowly, they started going through everyone, and I was just like in awe. I was like, that person is called. They're already serving at this church. They're going to be worship leader at this church. They're going to do this. That's pretty cool. Next person, wow, they're going to be a missionary in Cuba. And each person that responded was like, I'm not willing to move district. Like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is it. I don't want to move around. And it finally got to me, and I was like, so I took all my courses for youth. And I, imagine maybe one day I'll be an associate. But at the same time, if God asks more of me, I'm not going to say no. So wherever God is going to guide me and lead me, then that's the way I'll serve. As far as district is concerned, I'm like, well, Abraham left everything behind to go where God had called him. And then he waited 25 years before even a single promise came through. Right? And I'm like, no, I'm willing to go wherever God is going to lead me. And so I was really hoping that the second half of the horseshoe, because I was kind of in the middle, would have maybe noticed something there. They didn't. They were all still stuck. They didn't want to move. They didn't want to. And I went from being like 9 years of youth ministry, and then someone asked if I would be a lead pastor, and I'll admit I laughed in their face. I was like, no, not a chance, but here I am today. I didn't want to do with my life what I wanted to do. I just want to serve God. I just want to do what He needs me to do. And I find that when I chase after that, the journey, it's not easy. I'll admit, it's not an easy journey giving your life to God, having Him guide you in things. Because He brings you through some scary points. But in those points, He makes you grow in wisdom, and prepares you for like big things that He has in store for you. And then when you finally get to that point, you look back and be like, wow, God brought me through this. He brought me through this. And I remember feeling like I was in the worst valley and everything in life was miserable, but He took me out of that. He took care of everything in all situations. He taught me to depend on Him more and more. And I did. I laid everything at His feet and said, God, you got to carry me through this. And He has. I look back and I'm just like, wow, God is good. And then I look forward and I'm just like, this is terrifying where we're going next. But, I mean, if you took me this far, I know You'll take me the rest of the way. I have come to give you life, and give you life in the full, to give you full satisfaction in life. Can I encourage you guys to enjoy the peace that God has given? Ooh, wow, I really went ahead in my hands. There you go. There's my closing statement. Do you need peace? So when you understand that peace, Jehovah Shalom, means that fullness, that provision for it. It includes health. It includes wealth. It includes security and safety and tranquility. And I just think of people who live their lives full of anxiety, full of fear of what's to come, or even looking for ways to cause security for themselves or provide for themselves. And it's like, I ask the question, do you need the peace of God? So whether you need to let go of something, or whether you need to realize that your satisfaction in life, your fullness of life, will only be found in God, maybe we need to wrestle with that this morning. Maybe we need to start letting go a little bit of what we want and follow a little bit more of what God wants for us. And again, it's terrifying, but it's also beautiful and fulfilling. Well, you guys, so we're going to close in a song. You guys can sit there if you want to bow your heads and just think about that peace, that aspect of God. Throughout the Bible, when God, so we're going through a series of God's name, is what we've been doing, and God reveals like part of who He is every time He gives us a name. And so whether it's like peace, which is what we've covered today, whether it's a God of provision, and He's going to provide for us everything we need. When He reveals who He is, we get to know Him. Like we know that about Him, like God is creator, right? That's like one of the first we see in our Bibles, like God has created. It's like, well, that's just who our God is. He loves to create. He loves to make. And since we're like made in His image, that gets impressed upon us as well. But when God reveals who He is, it reveals part of His character. And we get to just be like, whoa, like this is who He is, right? And so understanding God as the God of peace, not just absence of conflict, but as a God who wants us to enjoy peace, to know that we're completely taken care of, that he's got us in the palm of his hand and everything's going to be okay. That yes, there'll be tough times, but he's going to help us to grow. And when we get to know God in that way, there's a beauty in it. There's a confidence in it. Because it's like God revealed who he is in this way. It's part of his character, but it's also something he revealed to me that I get to enjoy. If God is healer, that's just who he is, then I get to enjoy healing in my life. And so God is peace, and we need to enjoy that peace in our lives. David, will you cue up the song? Or Ryan? Awesome. So take a moment and just wrestle with where you don't have peace in your life. Your anxieties,